everyone for joining us on this sad day for our community and for all those who know and love our dear friend, Mordechai Yitzchak ben Pinchas Eliezer, Dr. Mark Oberlander. As we gather for a Kavod Acharon, a final honor and tribute to Mark and his life well lived. David HaMelech, King David, gives us words to use when it feels like there are none, so we begin with a couple of chapters of Psalms. I'll read in Hebrew and English, Psalm 15, Tehillim Perek Tesvav. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai mi yagur b'Ohelecha, mi yishkon behar kodshecha, holech tamim ufoel tzedek, v'dover emes bilvavo, lo ragal al lishono, lo asa l're'ehu ra'a, v'cherpa lo nasa al kerovo. Nivzeh be'inav nim'as, ve'es yir'ei Adonai yichabed, nishba lehara v'lo yamir, kaspo lo nasan beneshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, osei ele lo yimot li'olam. A song of David. Lord, who may sojourn in your tent, who may dwell on your holy mountain? One who walks in purity, does what is righteous, and speaks the truth from the heart, who has no slander on the tongue, nor has done harm to a fellow, nor casts disgrace toward a neighbor, in whose eyes a contemptible person is repulsive, but who honors those who are in awe of the Lord, who swears truthfully even to personal hurt and never retracts, who does not lend money on interest, nor takes a bribe against the innocent. One who does these things shall never falter. I want to invite Rabbi Jamie Gordon, a longtime friend and rabbi of Mark and the Oberlander family, to recite Tehillim Perek Chafgil.
Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achsar, bin odesha yarbitzeni al me menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshoved yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo irara, ki ata imadi. Shiftecha umish'antecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, Dishanta v'shemen roshi kosi revaya. Achto v'chesed yirtefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shafti b'veit Adonai li'orech yamin.
Mark was loved and admired by so many. Just look around and you'll see family and friends, young and old, from near and far, all here gathered, a room full, to remember, to honor, and to mourn Mark's passing. This past Shabbos at Shul was a bit surreal and bittersweet, as so many, with tears of sadness and smiles on our faces, remembering the lessons and the stories, the values that we all had the chance to learn from Mark over the years. This afternoon we have a chance to hear some words of hesped, eulogy and memory from his beloved family, who will share a small piece of a great man. I want to invite Mark's beloved son, Michael.
Dad, it is very hard to believe that it has been barely 3 months since you received the brain cancer diagnosis. You told me and everyone else that you were determined to fight the cancer like an invading Russian army. Dad, it took me a long time to choose the word determined. Other words have often popped into my mind, and perhaps the minds of others about you. Stubborn, persistent, strong-willed, but none of those are quite right. I think determined is an apt descriptor because it implies that you took in all the necessary information, weighed the pros and cons, and made a determination of the right course of action for you. But you also remained open to learning new facts, reconsidering the course of action, and ultimately changing your mind. And as I told Idan just a few minutes ago, Papa would be able to hear his prayers when he speaks out, and you really do not need to take him out from me. Throughout this ordeal, Dad, there was one constant. You remained in control of the decision-making. You decided to seek treatment after consulting with all of the appropriate medical experts. You decided how to get the treatment. You decided when to get more help in the house. You decided when to stop the treatment, but leaving open the possibility to restart treatment. And you decided when to go on hospice. And ultimately, you decided that you wanted to die with the same dignity with which you lived. Thank you for being such an amazing role model. Dad, there's so much that I want to say. I joked with the family that this Hesped will come in under 2.5 hours. But everyone who knows you knows that you are always early. Shachrit starts at 6:30 a.m., so you have to be at shul at 6:20. How ironic it would be if you were late for your own kavura. I won't do that to you. Just 6.5 years ago, we said goodbye to Mom. Your best friend, your wife, your everything. Since then, so much has changed. Yo said something to me this week that really resonated with me. While Mom was alive, you were a unit. I could talk to one of you, and you would pass along the pertinent information to the other. A visit was a visit to both of you. Of course, we had always had our special time together. Catches in the backyard, playing chess, going to shul on Sunday morning, and then to McDonald's for your coffee and cigarette, and my English muffin and hash browns. Since Mom died, we developed a different type of relationship. At Mom's funeral, I spoke about that week's Parsha Shmot, the beginning of a new book of the Torah, and how we had to turn to a new book in our lives, a new book without our mother, grandmother, wife, a new book that was yet to be written, but that would be missing a most important character. In the last 6.5 years, you certainly added new chapters, new experiences, new challenges, new characters. You still didn't learn how to cook, though, not even in the air fryer. The most important new character that you added, of course, is Nancy. Nancy, we didn't know your Steve, but your Steve must have been as special as Mom, for you and Dad to have been able to connect so well, support each other so beautifully, communicate so lovingly. I cannot possibly express in words my gratitude to you for bringing joy and laughter back into Dad's life, for being his companion, for caring for him, for loving him, for accepting him into your life, and for joining our lives. Dad, my drives home from Yerushalayim will be extremely difficult, and not just because of the traffic. I look forward to our hour-long conversations. You told me all about what was going on in my life, as you often knew details before I did about who was going to be home for Shabbat. Dad, I'm so glad that we were able to spend a week together in July. We had such good talks. And thank you for last week. Thank you for the opportunity to spend so much time with you. Over the last heartbreaking 11 months, I shared with you my crises in faith, my inability to connect to the tefillot. Last week, I read every word of the morning prayers out loud for you. Well, to be honest, I didn't enunciate some that I thought might cause you distress. And I must thank you. I connected to the tefillot in a whole different way. So just as you taught me my Aleph Bet while you were sorting and adding up your sales tax receipts when I must have been 3, And when you taught me Ashrei in the Shema, you kept teaching me about the importance of tefillah. I cannot promise you that I will never have doubts in the future. But what I can say is that I will always have these memories to give me strength and to remind me how tefillot have helped me. Dad, you died so peacefully, surrounded by Sami, me, and so many of us who loved you. Unfortunately, we cannot all be with you. I am sure that amongst your final thoughts were thoughts about Mom, your beloved Mitch, your parents. And you know that your grandchildren, and Idan, your adorable great-grandson, who were not there in body, were certainly there with you in thoughts and prayers. Dad, there were certain mitzvot that were especially meaningful to you. One of those was Kibbud Av V'Em. You were an amazing role model for me in how you cared for and honored Grandma and Grandpa. You called them every day. You saw them so often. It might just be a cop-out, but I also think you set an impossibly high standard for me. I strived, but I know that I failed to meet that standard. I will not ask you for mechila now, as we already discussed this last week. And I will always remember the feeling of your hand on my face as you comforted me. When I learned with Rabbi Alan Green, Zichron Tzadik L'Bracha, for all those years in St. Louis, there were so many times that something came up in a week's parsha that was echoed or quoted in the Gemara that we were learning, or in the other learning that I did during the week. I often shared with you those coincidences. Rabbi Green tried to convince me that there were no coincidences. Dad, it is quite appropriate that you passed away just a few hours before Shabbat Kiteitzei. That parsha contains more mitzvot than any other parsha in the Torah. One of those 74 mitzvot was another that was particularly important to you. V'yomot titain zecharo v'lo tavo ilav. Alav hashemesh ki ani hu ve'ilav hu nasi et nafsho v'lo yikra elecha el Hashem v'haya v'cha chet. The translation is, you must pay him his wages on the same day, before the sun sets, for he is needy and urgently depends on it. Else he will cry to the Lord against you, and you will incur guilt. Ramban explains that the Torah speaks of the common occurrence, the hiring of a day laborer for one day who would leave toward evening before sunset. And so we are commanded to pay him during his day as soon as he finishes his work, in order that he should be able to purchase what he and his family need to eat that night. For he would be poor, as are most of those who hire themselves out for the day. Although that is no longer the case, you always made sure to pay those who worked for you on the day they worked, even when not required. That is how you treated the amazing caregivers who helped you these past months. Those you referred to as your angels, including Arnold, Dio, Ryan, and others. But your kindness to those performing services for you went further. Friday is the day that the gardeners cut the lawn. Nancy told us that you would sit outside with cold bottles of water for them. Even though you could not do so last Friday, Maayan gave out those cold bottles of water. Dad, you will be missed by so many people. And this week is the week that my learning with two friends from St. Louis was supposed to continue learning Sefer Yecheskel, the book of Ezekiel. We are up to chapter 24, Dad. In that chapter, Hashem tells the prophet that his wife will die and that the prophet will not weep or mourn. What the prophet says is, moan softly, observe no mourning for the dead. Put on your turban and put your sandals on your feet. Do not cover your upper lip and do not eat the bread of comforters. Such odd language. But the meaning is pretty clear, at least it is to Rashi. There are certain things that mourners do that the prophet should not do, even though he will be in mourning. Is it a coincidence that this is the chapter of Yecheskel that I was supposed to be learning this morning? I don't think so, as I reviewed it and learned it while putting this Hesped together. Dad, you instilled in us such pride in being part of our family, pride in being part of the Jewish people. You instilled in us such a love of Israel. Dad, Papa, you were so proud of all of your grandchildren and so adored Idan. Each of them will struggle to fill the void in their lives now that you are gone. I do not think that your brain tumor was coincidental. When your neuroscientist granddaughter and neurosurgeon grandson were able to help you and us understand, to the extent it was understandable, what you were facing. Monty, just a quick word. I can't thank you enough for all you did for Papa and for all of us these past months. I don't know your surgical skill, which I am sure is great, but your bedside manner and your ability to explain complex matters, medical matters in difficult circumstances is beyond compare. You made this extremely difficult time so much easier for me, but more importantly, you made it easier for Papa. Dad, I know that our Aliyah was both a source of pride for you and also a source of difficulty. Being so far away was hard, but you never made me feel guilty for it. And we all know how proud you were that 5 of your grandchildren served Israel in her defense forces. Dad, thank you for giving me the example of how to create community, a community that includes lifelong friends, as well as being open and welcoming to newcomers. Thank you to all of our lifelong friends who are really like family. Those who always welcomed us into their homes and made our visits to you so comfortable. And thank you to Rabbis Fox and Karsh and the entire DNG family for being so loving and caring to Mom, to Dad, to Nancy, and to all of us. Dad, thank you for being my dad. I love you.
I'd like to invite Mark's pride and joy, his beloved grandchildren representing the many grandchildren that he loved, Noah, Naomi, and Eitan Oberlander.
I'm really so heartbroken to be here today, standing and speaking about Papa in the past tense. Eitan and I just flew in last night, directly after Shabbat from Israel, but that hasn't even touched the whirlwind of emotions that I've been feeling. The most confusing, yet most comforting emotion has actually been gratitude. And Papa, I learned this from you. You truly embodied this trait. Yael and I were so fortunate to spend precious time with you just a few weeks ago. It was truly so special. During that time, I felt like I saw the real you. Despite everything that your body was doing to you, you kept reminding us how lucky you were for all of Hashem's gifts. We were filled with hope when we spoke about all the places in Tel Aviv that we were going to go to eat and about all the lemon poppy muffins we were going to eat. Papa, you led a life full of gratitude, thankful for all the little things. During our time together, you reflected on the long, full life that you lived. From your time in the reality school in Haifa to coming to America at 16 without knowing a single word of English, and even what made you want to marry Grandma Bunny. You watched trashy Israeli pop culture TV with us, and we laughed a lot. When we spoke, you often chose to speak in Hebrew, the language that was most sacred and personal to you. We would converse in Hebrew, and you would gently, or sometimes not so gently, correct my grammatical mistakes while praising Yael for her command of the language. You shared that when you chose your degree in the career which you wanted to pursue, you picked the one that you thought would be employable in Israel, because that's where you thought you were going to end up after university. But life takes us in unexpected places, and you built a beautiful family and life for yourself in America. I'm grateful that we can now continue your legacy and pick off where you left off on that journey. Papa, you are a miracle child, born into the worst of humanity with the odds stacked against you. Listening to Grandpa Paul's voice describing the events of your early childhood made me feel ever so close to you. I can hardly believe that the Papa, the man I knew, was the same cute, playful baby that lived through such horrors. You taught us to be grateful for what life gives us, and I'm so grateful to you and our family. We are a miracle family, built and sustained by you. I feel grateful that I can even be here today. When Grandma Bunny passed away, I was in the Army and could not make the funeral or Shiva. I know how hard it is to not have the proper time to mourn, hear stories, and go through it with family. Ilana, who could not be here today because she is now in the Army, I love you and I know how hard this is for you. Papa, I'm grateful that I got to share my life with you, that you got to know and love Yael, that we could share birthdays together, and that you and Nancy were able to celebrate with us at our wedding. I will never forget you dancing with your ponytail. I am sad, though, that this is where it ends, that you won't be able to hold my one-day children and soon grow up to embody the values and lessons that you taught me. Papa, your time on earth came to end in the month of Elul, the time when we prepare to anoint God as our King on Rosh Hashanah and meet God as a people worthy of redeeming on Yom Kippur. Papa, you left this world pure. We could see it in you, Papa. Your soul was whole, pure, and ready for its next stage. Papa, I wish I could have more explicitly asked you for Mechila. Mechila for all the times that I unintentionally hurt you, forgot to call you before Shabbat, and did not give you enough attention. I am sorry. Papa, I will miss your smile. I will miss your questions about work, life, and Yael. I will miss telling you about all my swims in the sea, and about the countless adventures you and Grandma went on. I will miss connecting over your love of scuba diving and snorkeling. I will miss watching your dedication to Torah study and your commitment to your community. Papa, by living life the way you did, you instilled in me the values that will help guide me as I live mine. I love you, and I will carry your legacy with me always. Shalom v'להתראות.
I really miss my papa. And beyond that, I don't have many words to say. I really miss my papa. My papa had many different sides to him. A Holocaust survivor, a settler of the land of Israel, a PhD, a father who lost his child, a man who lost his wife, community pillar, devout believer, avid learner, father, grandfather, great-grandfather. After my grandma passed, I began to appreciate these sides to my papa in a new way, as I began to establish a new type of relationship with him, an adult relationship. Adult granddaughter and her mourning grandfather. I would send my papa weekly emails recapping my week with photos to accompany every story. We would speak on the phone, often and in Hebrew, as his grandchildren moving to Israel brought him great joy, always ending each conversation with "Lehitraot," I will see you later. In this new relationship with my papa, every conversation carried a few principal pillars: his unwavering belief in God, his deep love for the land of Israel and her people, his love for adventure and his youthful spirit, his silly humor, and his warmth and love for his family. We were no longer talking about Hanukkah presents or vacations. We are talking about Hashem's plans, the hardships he puts in front of us, and my papa's undying faith that Hashem will lead us through. These conversations became especially meaningful after October 7th. My siblings and I would joke that your favorite was whichever sibling was currently serving in the IDF. Ilana is currently back home in Israel, getting ready to head to base early tomorrow morning and continue fighting this war for all of us. Every word I said here is also a sentiment of Ilana's love and admiration for you, Papa. She loves you so much. Papa, your faith is inspiring. The community you built around you is eternal, and the values you instilled in your family led us to Israel and continue to lead us every day. I am thankful for you in more ways than I can describe. I love you so much, Papa. L'hitraot.
My grandmother, Grandma Bunny of blessed memory, passed away a few months before I turned 18. For me, it's a terrible personal tragedy that I never got to know my grandma as an adult. As I was reaching the stage of leaving the house, beginning to gain independence and increase maturity, she left this world. My relationship with her will always be that of a child. I have been incredibly privileged in the past few years, able to build a relationship with my grandfather as an adult. We could have real conversations that I could not have had with him when I was younger. I could ask him questions I never would have thought to ask him previously and receive real answers. We could build a very deep and very real connection beyond the basic grandparent-grandchild relationship. We would speak for hours and hours about family history. That was how we spent most of our time together during my trips to Chicago. He passed on lots and lots of family history, from what he remembered from his parents sharing about Turka and Yavora and Lvov, to his travels through Europe and eventually Israel, to his immigration to Chicago, and the long journey of a lifetime as unfolded since. For me, my papa was a link to the glorious chain of Jewish history. My grandfather was born into a world he never got to be a part of. He was born in Lvov, a Jewish center for hundreds of years, yet he was born just a month after the terrible Lvov pogrom of 1941. He never got to experience Jewish life in Europe. He lived the first years of his life unaware of his Jewish identity. I'm always surprised when I remember the fact that Papa did not know he was Jewish for the first years of his life. I'm surprised because I've ever only known my grandfather as a very Jewish person. What do I mean by very Jewish? Well, first of all, he was an incredibly proud Jew. He was never afraid or embarrassed to express his Judaism however he thought was proper. He told me how he joined the counter-protests when Nazis were allowed to march through Skokie. I was always inspired to see how he would proudly display support of Israel no matter the circumstance. But more than that, he seemed very Jewish because everything religious seemed to come so naturally for him. He would always speak in very religious terms, seeing the world through a very religious lens. The past few months, he constantly spoke of everything happening as Hashem's plan, so he's okay with it. He saw angels and signs from above all along his medical journey. The past few months, as my siblings mentioned, Papa spoke a lot of Hebrew, the language of a large part of his childhood, that fell into disuse for many years. For the last few months, and especially the last few weeks, this was the language he chose to speak. My brother pointed out to me as we were flying in today that this is what came naturally to him. When push came to shove, Papa reverted back to the Hebrew language, the Jewish language. Judaism was in his DNA. It ran through his veins. As my intellectual interest began to take shape, I took a particular interest in Jewish life in Eastern Europe during the 19th and early part of the 20th centuries. No matter how much I read in books, articles, or primary sources, nothing felt as real as speaking with Papa. The history was no longer just history. It was my history. I would look up the towns Papa mentioned in the thick volumes of the Encyclopedia Chachamech Galicia and Yeshiva Library. I could see which rabbis served these towns and try to track down their published works. I could read the Sifrei Zikaron of these places, the first-hand accounts of various community members, and try to imagine my great-grandparents among the Jewish populations there. Papa tried to maintain this deep connection to the lost world of European Jewry. It often seemed he was the only one left who cared. He would commemorate many of our family members who were murdered in the Holocaust. He would try to observe the yard sites of every distant relative. Now that he's gone, who's left to care? Who's going to make sure that their memory lives on? No one would be able to maintain the deep feeling of connection that he could. Even with all the family history you shared with me, there's so much we didn't get to. And I'm sorry, Papa, that I didn't write it down, and I forgot so much. So much of our past, our family history, has left the world with you. Woe for those that are lost and cannot be found. Papa was so proud of his children and grandchildren and great-grandchild, each of us on our own path, and he could not be prouder of each of us. He always wanted updates on my learning in yeshiva. When my grandfather was my age, the idea of studying yeshiva was nowhere near his radar. I think part of him did wish he had the opportunity when he was younger to engage in Torah study in a more serious and deeper way, and I think he was incredibly happy that I had this opportunity. Papa was always most eager to hear updates about Rabbanut exams, the test taken in Israel for rabbinic ordination. I think Papa was the person most invested in me taking his test, much more than I was myself. Pretty much every time he would speak, he would ask if I had results yet, and I have to remind him that there's a lot of bureaucracy and the scores take a very long time to come back. On my last visit, just a few weeks ago, While I was here, I received results that I passed my second exam, and I could share that with Papa. I was happy I got the results only because I could share them with him, and I knew that it would bring him so much joy. Papa was very dedicated to his daily learning. For many years, he woke up early in the morning to learn Daf Yomi with a wonderful group in his community. When we spoke on the phone, Papa and I would often discuss whatever Daf they were up to. He would tell me about the topic and some questions or observations he had. When the topics were something I had touched on in yeshiva, I could share with him the various opinions and the commentators and some of the yeshiva-style analysis. He was incredibly satisfied with the learning he did with this group. He would often say to me, "In Daf Yomi, we don't go deep into things the way you do in yeshiva. It's a different style." My Papa's learning has always inspired me and will continue to inspire me. The Mishnah Avot teaches us the Fun Sara Agra. The reward is according to the pain, the effort put in. My Papa put in so much effort. Not just because he started studying Talmud at an older age, and not just because of the daily effort of attending shiurim early in the morning, every day for years and years, but even more so recently. Even when he was sick and could not leave the house, he made sure to log into Zoom calls and attend the daily shir, even if he would sometimes get confused with times. When he could no longer attend services, he had me order him an English Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the book that Rabbi Fox teaches after Shachri, so he could try to keep up on his own. The Rashbitz, a medieval rabbinic authority, in his comments to this Mishnah Avot, points us to a statement in the Talmud in Tractate Sota, which teaches us a similar concept. The Gemara tells us of a certain widow who had a synagogue close to her home, yet nonetheless, every day she made the long walk to the study hall of the great Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan asked her why she traveled so far and does not simply pray in the synagogue in her neighborhood. She answered him, "Rebbe, v'lo schar psiot yeshli?" My teacher, do I not attain reward for all the steps I take while walking to pray in a distant study hall? My grandfather surely received schar psiot, reward for his steps, as he traversed many congregations and synagogues, and even more buildings, along his journeys in Northbrook, always in search of authenticity and community. For some periods in his life, he would walk an hour each way to shul. He surely received reward for each step, and he surely received reward for every stop on the journey and for overcoming every difficulty along the way. The rabbis teach us in a statement we read every day after the blessings on the Torah that there are some things we receive reward for in this world, even though the principal reward remains intact for the next world. On this list of things are Torah study and rising early to go to the study hall. I can see the reward my grandfather received in this world for his study and his effort to build a community. The Darchei Noam community has been amazing for Papa. It's hard as a grandchild to live so far away from a grandparent. And when I would visit and see Rabbi Fox and the rest of the Darchei Noam community that was there for my grandfather, I would feel a little bit better, knowing that Papa was part of such a wonderful and caring community. A community that Papa was so invested in its future. When Papa went to the hospital just before Shavuot, I called to speak with him before Chag. He had one main concern on his mind he wanted to talk to me about, something he wanted to make sure I would take care of. Erev Shavuot is the yard site of my great-grandfather, Grandpa Paul. Papa was very concerned with the idea that there would be no one saying Kaddish for him on his yard site, as he was in the hospital with no minyan. I promised him I'd make sure someone was saying Kaddish. In this very difficult moment for Papa, this is what was on his mind. Rabbi Fox shared with me that when he went to visit my grandfather on Erev Shavuot, he was bothered by something else. He was worried there was going to be no one to hand out candy to the children in shul on Shavuot if he wasn't there. There was a substitute ready to replace him for Chag. These two things were on my grandfather's mind as he lay in a hospital bed, unsure of his diagnosis, unsure of what treatment would look like, unsure to what degree he would be able to return to his normal life. These two things, Kaddish for his father and candy for the children in his congregation. Kaddish, a connection to our past, to our family history, to the history of the Jewish people, and caring for the children in his congregation, making sure that they had a sweet and positive association with coming to services in synagogue, a concern for the Jewish future. This was my Papa, a man rooted deeply in the Jewish past, yet able to look forward. I hope that this is a picture I have managed to paint for you, because this is how I knew Papa. Yeh Zichro Baruch.
The word sabra is Hebrew slang to refer to someone who is born in Israel. It's loosely translated as a prickly pear, which on the outside is tough and strong. It can grow almost anywhere and survive almost anything. And on the inside, it's a sweet, soft, delicious fruit. It has come to symbolize the people of Israel who are tough, strong, tenacious, and determined. And I wrote that word before I knew that was your chosen word for your father. But our inside, our essence, is sweet, loving, gentle, and peaceful. Now I know that Mark wasn't born in Israel, but I believe his soul was born in Israel. He lived there as a child, and he was certainly deeply connected to the land and its people. And to me, he represented the best of what it means to be a Sabra. Mark was strong and principled. From the very beginning of his life, he really had no choice. He had to be strong, to run and to hide, to survive. And he bore the title of Holocaust survivor with pride and with reverence. As mentioned, he never forgot the family members and relatives who didn't survive, and he honored them by saying Kaddish on their yahrzeits every single year. He came to a new country at the age of 15. When he came to Chicago, he learned a new language, made new friends, adjusted to a new culture, and went on to get his college degree and PhD, an accomplishment that he held with pride for his entire life. Just last night, as we took out an old wedding album with the family, I noticed that on his and Bunny's wedding invitation it said, Mr. Mark Oberlander, and I joked that I was surprised that he let that go. He wasn't a doctor yet then, but still. He was committed to what he knew was right. He was absolutely steadfast, as mentioned, in coming to Minyan every single day, often twice a day, morning and night. He came to Daf Yomi every single morning, a class that at one time began at 5:30 a.m., and he was there on time, or early, I think, because I wasn't. And more recently, a little bit later, but he stuck with it no matter when it was. He was one of our chazanim. He led our prayer service. He davened Pesukei Zimra every year, the beginning of the service on Rosh Hashanah. And even when he wasn't officially the chazan, he was often still the one picking the tunes, because he had the loudest voice. So he chose the tune that we would sing. And although I hope and I plan to certainly remember him most for when he was vibrant and strong, up and about, even in these last few difficult months, his determination was as present as ever. Physically, as mentioned, he fought and battled far more than anyone could have expected, and spiritually, he did everything that he could, even when it became more and more difficult. When I visited him that first time in the hospital right before Shavuos, he actually made two requests of me. One was, yes, to make sure that somebody went into his talis bag and took out the lollipops so that, God forbid, the children of DNG should not be missing their lollipops on Shavuos. And the other was if I could help him get a large print sitter, because he was having trouble seeing the small letters from his hospital bed in his sitter that he had brought with him, and he wanted to be able to make sure to daven from a larger sitter. When he came home from the hospital, but he still couldn't come to shul, he asked me one time if I could bring him the source sheets that I distribute during my class each Shabbos morning so that he can try and learn them on his own. Most people who come to the class don't even like the source sheets, but Mark asked for a special home delivery. He called me several times with questions, halachic guidance to make sure that as things changed and developed, he wanted to do things the right way. And yes, one of those questions was, as referenced earlier, that if his caregivers prefer to be paid at the end of the week, was he allowed to do that, or must he pay them each day before they leave? That's what he was thinking about as he was transitioning to a life where he needed a caregiver. This was a theme that was mentioned by his children and his family over the past few days, that whatever he did throughout his life, professionally, religiously, socially, he did it well and he did it right. And yet, all that being said, I don't think that was Mark's essence. His essence is what was on the inside. His sweet and kind love and care. His love for his children, and especially for his grandchildren and great-grandchild. He would often remind me that he has a grandson who's studying to be a rabbi, and sometimes he would even remind me that to become a rabbi in Israel is more demanding and the tests are harder than to become a rabbi in America. Message received. And yes, he was beaming with pride when he found out, Eitan, that you passed your most recent exam. He would tell us about his grandson, the doctor, his grandchildren who were bravely fighting on the IDF and living in Israel, and truly he was beyond proud of each and every one of you. You know, Mark was the one who, for many years, said the Misha Berach, the special prayer for Chayalei Tzahal, for the soldiers of the IDF every Shabbos. And of course, we continue to say it, and we all pray and beg Hashem to protect our brothers and sisters who are fighting. but it doesn't quite sound the same when it doesn't come from a grandfather who's praying for his grandchildren. It was a true honor to Mark and a beautiful sign of the grandchildren's love for him, that every single one of his grandchildren and their spouses came to visit in these past few months from all around the world to spend time and to talk to him, just to show him that he loved and cared, from Portland to Israel to San Francisco. I know for certain, because he told me, that there is nothing that Mark looked forward to more than a visit from a grandchild, and you were all there for him and with him until the very end. I want to tell you a couple of stories about Mark at shul. As was mentioned, Mark was our beloved shul candy man. It's one of the most important, in my opinion, and influential positions in synagogue life. All of the children come to shul and go straight to Dr. Oberlander. My children would come to shul and usually forget to stop and even say hi to me, but I would see them nearby if I turned around and looked to the right, that they were making a beeline straight for Dr. Oberlander to get their Shabbos treat. And to see Mark's great joy in bringing a smile to a child in shul, it was something that was clear for all to see. Mark came to me a couple of weeks before Pesach last year, which amazingly is just 5 or 6 months ago, with a big problem. He had gone to a couple of stores and couldn't find kosher for Pesach lollipops. He asked that if I come across to please buy them and he'll pay me back. So a few days later I was in Sarah's tent and I saw some, so I FaceTimed him. Now I usually call my wife from the grocery store to find out how many of these, or is this the right thing, or they're out of this. But there I was FaceTiming Mark in the candy section, describing that they have pashkas, fruit variety, kosher for Pesach lollipops, $75 a bag or something. And Mark said, please get a lot. I want to make sure that we don't run out and we have enough for all 8 days of Pesach. I'll pay you back. I mentioned before that Mark was a regular chazan for us in shul, and he often davened Psukei Zimra. But Mark didn't just say or lead Psukei Zimra. If you've been there, you know Mark would sing it. Now, for those not familiar, it's the part of the service that we usually read through a little bit more quickly, go through it quietly. Sometimes the crowd is still arriving and joining. I've honestly never seen or heard anyone else besides Mark sing that part of the service. But to Mark, davening in prayer wasn't just something we do or something that we have to do, but it was something that should be sung, something that we appreciate, that we love, that we enjoy. And honestly, I find myself sometimes, even when Mark isn't the chazan for Psukei Zimra, and even since he hasn't been in shul these past few months, humming and singing those very same tunes to myself as I say Psukei Zimra. One last story that touched me very personally, also just from a few months ago. Our shul introduced a new project. As we're creating a talis to be displayed and to be used on Simchas Torah, the first commemoration of the terrible war that began almost a year ago, and it'll have all the names of the kids and grandkids in our shul. It's a small fundraiser. You have to pay for each name to be put on. And as soon as we sent out an email sharing the project with the shul, one of the first, it may have actually been the very first response that we got, was from Mark. I think, I tried to check the timing in my emails, I believe he was actually in the hospital at the time. He was certainly struggling and healing and recovering. And his email asked to make a donation from his account to this project, and that it paid for the names of my children to be included on the talis as a gift from him. And for me, it wasn't just about the money, although that was, of course, very generous and much appreciated, but the fact that this is what he was thinking about from his hospital bed. And I know that each year, God willing, for many years, when we take out that talis, I will especially think of Mark then. His generosity, his kindness, and his true love and dedication to the children and the future of our shul. 11 days ago, because I remember the date, I was sitting with Mark on his porch outside. He was smiling, but a bit forgetful and coming to terms with what was happening. He asked me what the Hebrew date was, and I told him that it was actually Rosh Chodesh Elul, the first day of the month of Elul. Now I'll come back to that in a moment. It's interesting because Mark passed away in the 10th day of the month of Elul. And Elul really is a month that has two sides or two aspects to it. It is a month of intensity, of strength. of almost fear or reverence as we prepare for the days of judgment, for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We remind ourselves of the importance of all that Mark stood for, of coming to pray in shul, of learning, of family. It's also a month of Ani L'Dodi V'Dodi Li, which is an acronym for the month of Elul, has become sort of the motto of the month. I am to my beloved and my beloved is to me. It's a month where we recommit to our love of Hashem and our love for each other, something so deeply represented in Mark's life. But I told Mark it's the first day of the month of Elul. We blew shofar this morning in shul, as we do each morning leading up to Rosh Hashanah. And Mark asked if I could blow shofar for him. So I did. I ran to shul and I grabbed my shofar and I blew shofar for him on his porch. And right after the Tikiyah Gedola, with some tears in his eyes, almost instinctively it poured out. Mark began reciting Kriyas Shema out loud. And like many righteous Jews over the centuries, in his final days, as it became hard to gather his thoughts and to really express himself the way he wished, what instinctively poured out his essence, what emerged almost automatically was the words of Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Mark shared, and even over these past few weeks and months, how blessed he felt to be surrounded by loving friends and family, and to have seen and felt lots of well-deserved nachas. He's a role model for his family and an inspiration to all of us here. And Mark, we will miss you, and you and all that you stood for will always be a part of us. Yehi zichro baruch. May his memory be for a blessing. In a moment, we'll say the Kel Malay prayer, a prayer for Mark's neshama, for the soul of Mordechai Yitzchak ben Pinchas Eliezer. We've prayed so much for Mark over these past few months, and Hashem did not choose the answer that we wished and hoped for. But we don't stop praying just because his body is no longer with us. We turn to Hashem in prayer, and we daven for the soul of Mark. Please rise. El Malay Rachamim Shochein Bamiromin Hamitzei Menucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShekhinah B'Ma'alos Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Rakia Mazirim Es Nishmas Mordechai Yitzchak ben Pinchas Eliezer Shalach Liolamo Bavur Shanachnu Mispalalim Biaz Karas Nishmaso Began Eden Tehei Menuchaso Lachein Baal Rachamim Yastirehu Beseser Knafav Liolamim Yitzror Achayim Es Nishmaso Adonai hu nachalaso, yanuach b'shalom amishkavo, v'nomar amen. If we can invite the 6 pallbearers, we'll be honored to carry Mark's aron to come to the front. This concludes the service.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service, you can be seated. The interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The family will be returning to the Oberlander residence in Northbrook. Please see the service folder that you received regarding the Shiva times, the memorial contribution places, Darchei Noam, Glenbrook, Lurie Children's Hospital of Chicago, Hadassah Chicago North Shore, American Friends of Magen David Adom, or the charity of your choice. For those of you who will be driving in the funeral procession to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, we will be providing a car in the back of the procession to hopefully keep other cars from entering the procession. Please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. For those of you who are joining us online, all the information relating to the Shiva and memorial contributions can be found on our website. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Dr. Mark Oberlander from the chapel, and you may return to your cars. You're just going to follow Jeremy, okay? Just so you know, you're just going to follow Jeremy, and then we'll go to the side, okay?
Very nice.